Let's be frank with ourselves. Life is getting more hectic and demanding all the time, and we aren't getting any younger. It seems that there's only one way to cope: multitasking. A stupidly high amount of individuals all over the internet, known as gurus, life hackers, and clowns, are trying to convince you of that very fact. The idea behind it is that it increases the productivity and the efficiency of the individual. Even though thousands of unofficial and unqualified people support the idea, similar to flat earthers or moon truthers, it's still just a theory, with no major study behind it. Ironically, the whole concept can be compared to juggling balls, because juggling one ball or one task is relatively easy and simple for your brain to focus on. Two balls split your brain's focus, making one have more mistakes. And three or more balls is chaotic and it's going to be a mess, no matter how good one is initially. To truly debunk the false theory of multitasking, let's start off with one ball and talk about what is multitasking and what happens within our brains. Secondly, let's add our second ball and talk about how multitasking affects people in their daily lives. And lastly, as we add our third ball and as it becomes chaotic, let's discuss the major impacts of multitasking on a global scale. Now then, as we throw our very first ball up into the air, let's ask the question: what is multitasking? According to Professor Kristen Rosen, the term was first used in the 1960s to describe computer performance. The human brain, however, is not a computer, and the definition changed along with it over time. Today, multitasking is defined as the ability to do multiple things simultaneously by Cambridge Dictionary, and is typically used to describe human beings. Moreover, human attention is a limited resource, unlike computers, and has to be monitored. The American Psychological Association, or APA, modeled visual attention like being like a flashlight. It can only be shown in one direction at any given moment. Our primary focus, what we're paying most attention to, is like the lightly bright center of that flashlight. It can also be visualized like a camera lens. Our attention can be narrowed in to focus on details, or narrowed out to be aware of multiple things at the same time. But it is physically impossible to zoom in and out at the exact same time. Even though in this context, multitasking should be impossible, but our brain still encourages the action for some reason. Nicholas Carr states, our brain itself encourages the action of multitasking because it craves information, even though in practicality it's not that good at processing data at the speed or intensity we find ourselves today. This is partially due to the fact that our short-term working memory, or working memory for short, has a very small capacity. Working memory essentially is the context of one's consciousness at any given moment. What you're aware of right now, which is a handsome Indian kid, is part of your working memory. What you're not aware of, such as the next trashy Netflix movie, is not part of your working memory. The whole concept can be described in the 1960s book, The Magical Number 7. In the book, the author states that one's working memory can hold around 7 pieces of information at any given time. No more, no less. Whether this be a 7-digit number or the names of 7 different people. When people take in too much information, such as studying last minute for your AP calculus test, what happens is information starts entering and exiting the brain at the exact same time. This phenomenon causes quite literally cognitive overload. In this state, one can't truly focus on anything because their brain doesn't have the function or capacity to do so. I personally experienced this last year when I was studying last minute for my calculus AB test. And let's just say my brain was preoccupied in intaking all the extra information that I didn't really understand anything. Now that we know why we multitask, let's move on and talk about how we multitask in our daily lives. Now, according to those gurus that I mentioned earlier, multitasking can be categorized into 3 different ways that we use it in our daily lives. First is to do 2 tasks at the same time. Second is to move back and forth from one task to another. And lastly is do a number of tasks in rapid succession. Now, most people, including you and me, multitask in one of these forms every single day, whether consciously or unconsciously. And it just happens that most people do it. Professor McFawn Apton states that many people over the US multitask on a daily basis because they crave information and FOMO. Wait, what's FOMO? FOMO is the fear of missing out. People fear missing out in tweets, Instagram notifications, text messages, and emails. FOMO is also the reason why most people watch cute cat videos while they're in their college lectures, or go on their Instagram feed while they're in the toilet. Now, because of FOMO, we are constantly connected through digital distractions that we receive on our smartphones, smartwatches, and computers. Now, this constant connection isn't inherently a bad thing per se. It's just we fail to look at the consequences. One prime example would be attention span. Even though multitasking has been on the rise, attention span sadly has not. Professor Elizabeth Mosgrove states, the attention span of millennials has dropped to 8 seconds in the last few years, and the attention span of Generation Z, my generation, has dropped to a measly 2.8 seconds. That's shocking. She later states that this decrease in attention span is directly correlated to the increase in multitasking that people do, whether through technology or other means. Now, on top of all of this, my generation spends at least 6 hours on our phones every day. That's almost a full-time job. And most of the time when we're doing this, it's usually during work or whenever we're at school. This is when FOMO is the strongest and when we have a sharp increase in boredom. Now, I'm not trying to discredit people's way of life. I'm no saint either. I spend at least 7 hours on my phone every day. But what I am saying is when people multitask to increase their productivity or to entertain themselves during a sharp increase in boredom, what happens is the exact opposite effects apply. Your boredom increases and you become less productive. Now then, as we reach the end of our show, and as it becomes way too chaotic to truly understand what's happening, let's add our third bulb and talk about the chaos multitasking can cause. Up until now, we've been mainly focusing on the more goofy or fun aspects of multitasking. But we need to realize that multitasking has the potential to kill millions, whether that be directly or indirectly. Multitasking at your home or at your work is relatively fine and has few harm. But engaging in distractive actions behind the steering wheel not only puts the driver, but everyone else on the road at risk. The CDC states that roughly 9 people die every day because of inattentive driving. Meanwhile, another 1,000 people sustain an injury because of inattentive car accidents. Accidents happen in seconds, and drivers are expected to react instantaneously to avoid those incidents. Car activities such as daydreaming, talking to your passengers, or even listening to music can be very distracting to a driver and can undermine those precious seconds. The CDC states, in a year, the United States gains 1,000 injuries related to inattentive car accidents. And 9,000 of those people don't come back home alive. On top of that, millions of other people die because of other multitask-related accidents, such as drilling with a power tool while not paying attention where you're actually drilling, or skiing but not paying attention to where you're going, or cooking but watching a YouTube video on the side. All these tasks seem innocent and fun, but if not truly paid attention to, or if not given focus, these can lead to the end of people's lives. The problem with multitasking isn't that it makes one less productive. It's that it distracts the user from the task at hand and potentially can kill millions all over the US. Reflecting back on my speech, we can see that juggling was a perfect analogy for multitasking. Because juggling one ball is easy. 2 balls is hard. And 3 balls is chaotic.